Innies, it's that time again. I woke up a week ago, pulled up a list of future video ideas, and that's when it hit me. We've never done a proper Ricken breakdown. I know, I'm just as shocked as you are. Now, there are a ton of characters on this show that aren't exactly easy to figure out. Honestly, just about every character is a mystery to some degree. Each character is a puzzle within a larger, carefully constructed mosaic. One person that sits near the top of the pile of weird characters is Ricken Hale, played by the incredibly hilarious Michael Curtis. So let's see if we can define this character and of course discuss some of the spicy theories that surround him. Severance basically slaps us across the face with the weirdness, but this Ricken character somehow manages to stand apart as a true enigma. What's good, Innies? Nautilus here, so you know it's about to get weird. Just a friendly heads up, we've got spoilers on the horizon. Just make sure you're ready for that. Big up to the patrons, holding it down. You're making dreams come true. Your generosity is always appreciated. And with that, I want to give a special shout out to Dave Parry, the latest member of the Nautilus crew. Thank you so much for supporting the channel here. Expect to see your name in the producer credits going forward. Thanks again, Dave. These are the assassination coordinates to the channel Discord. TV is kind of getting back to normal, so I plan on being a lot more involved over there soon. Alright, that's enough of the preamble. It's time to dive. Ricken Laszlo Hale. The name says it all, doesn't it? From his demeanor to his weird way of communicating, everything about this character tells us that there's nothing average about this man. Now we're gonna get into all of that, but let's start with the facts. What do we know about Ricken Hale? Well, taken from the Severance wiki, Ricken Hale was born in Indianapolis, Indiana, to two somewhat successful theater artists who both hailed from affluent backgrounds. More on that later. His conception and birth occurred on stage as part of a 9-month performance piece. Yes, you heard that right. Ricken's parents were committed to their work. Unfortunately, they were also emotionally distant, viewing him as unrefined. So they begrudgingly undertook the task of teaching him basic communication skills and cultural knowledge. Now, he was a painfully shy teenager, but he found comfort in writing plays and poetry and eventually gathered the courage to share his work with his parents, only to be met with mockery, labeling it as pedestrian. When Ricken turned 18, his parents granted him a good-sized chunk of his inheritance, making it clear that they would distance themselves until he discovered his true voice. After failed attempts as an electrician, gardener, and photographer, Ricken returned to his childhood passion for introspective writing. He met and married Devon, who captivated him immediately with her dry wit and ability to lovingly puncture his pretensions, providing the stability that he craved. Now, as a writer, Ricken has produced literary works with titles such as The You You Are, A Spiritual Biography of You, My Own Petard, Life of an American Gadfly, Wisdom from the Withered, and The Fun in Profundity. Wow, that only took 4 takes. Sorry for the laughter, but some of these titles sound like they were dreamed up during a collab between L. Ron Hubbard and Dr. Seuss. Interesting fact, when Ricken married Devon and her brother Mark married a fellow Professor Gemma, the couples spent a lot of time together, even going on joint vacations. Now, Ricken's backstory paints a picture of a childhood where his parents consistently undermined his self-esteem and kept him at arm's length emotionally and maybe even physically. It sounds like they were disappointed in his lack of natural artistic talent, and they put him under pressure to reach a comparable level of success, or they'd have nothing to do with him. Ouch. It's no wonder he says that he's afraid of being like his father. I think this puts Ricken in a position where he understands what it's like to be told he's not good enough. He's the perfect example of what can sometimes happen when we internalize criticisms to devastating effect. Ricken and Devon seem to have a mostly charmed life. They're doing alright by most standards, but we can't say for certain that his money is a result of a successful writing career. It could be that his current wealth is just what remains of the inheritance, because your boy ain't exactly making the New York Times bestseller list. But Ricken's got cash flow, and while he didn't opt for the priciest birthing setup for Devon's pregnancy, she was right next door to the senator's wives at the private birthing retreat. But it also says a lot that he pulled out all of the stops for Devon and soon-to-be baby Eleanor. Tinfoilers, do you hear that? That's the sweet sound of tinfoil crinkling, because it's theory time. There's a long list of inexplicable, strange things about Ricken, but there aren't many that will crinkle your tinfoil quite like these. The most popular of all Ricken theories is that Ricken is actually an Eagan. Ambrose Eagan, one of the former Lumen CEOs, is believed to be the relative responsible for the events that gifted the world with Ricken L. Hale. further down the family tree. This theory relies on the seeming connection between the fact that Ambrose was seen as the black sheep of the family, possibly implying that he and his immediate family were estranged from the Eagans at large, and Ricken is supposedly a part of that family that had been iced out. Now, there are a few other smaller clues that might support this alleged theory. For one, Ricken's a ginger, just like another Eagan we're all very familiar with. Some think that the writers intentionally took this route to hint at a connection between these two characters. Hale and Ricken as cousins somehow just sounds right. Some fans believe that it's his Eagan blood that's got Cobell so intent on getting all up in the family business by pretending to be a maternity care attendant. They say that this is just another example of Cobell's desperate attempt to be close to anyone Eagan. The idea that Ricken is an Eagan is interesting because it would be poetic for a former Eagan and a current outsider to be the catalyst for its downfall. But it's probably a lot more simple than this in reality. Ricken's job is to put out the opposing message to Lumen's dogma and trigger that revolution. Think of it like this. If Kier is Old Testament, Ricken is New Testament, the new paradigm. Ricken has come to undo the damage wrought by Lumen's current board by showing the severed employees of MDR the path to enlightened liberation. He's probably not a galaxy brain genius who concocted a plan to reduce Lumen to ash. Ricken appears to be more like Mr. Magoo. He kind of bumbles his way to victory without even knowing the score. Is Ricken an Eagan? Maybe. I'd say there are reasons to believe the chances are higher than average. However, I don't necessarily think that Cobell's reasons for infiltrating their lives has anything to do with getting close to Ricken, but instead has everything to do with her wanting insight into Mark's private life for her own personal agenda. And she doesn't seem to have any opinions of the Hales beyond clowning Ricken's ridiculous book. I think this is meant to show us that she doesn't take him seriously, nor does she believe him to be anyone special, aside from being related to her pet project. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't low-key hoping this turns out to be a thing. But I think it's far more likely that Ricken is just a guy that kind of steps in it. Okay, so we've got to address this one. It will definitely come up in any conversation about Ricken, but there's a theory out there that claims that Ricken isn't just any Eagan, but that he is in fact Kier himself. One Redditor suggests that the voice of Kier that we hear in the recordings in the Perpetuity Wing, well, that's the voice of actor Michael Chernus. Here, have a listen.
Should you tame the tempers as I did mine, then the world shall become but your appendage.
So what do you think? I can see how it does kind of sound like him intentionally affecting his voice to sound like an imagined version of Kier. Now that might not mean much because having an actor commit to more than one role on a project is not unusual at all, especially if the other role is voiced. However, if he is supposed to be Kier, then this is one slick little clue. The theory that Ricken is Kier is a wild one. Personally, I don't see it. That said, anything is possible when you're still in the first inning. As it stands, Ricken's role seems to be antithetical to everything Lumen or Kier want to accomplish. Honestly, one of the most debated questions is whether Ricken is severed or if he's really just like that. Let's take a look at some of the alleged clues and see if we can sort this one out. Starting with his name. Ricken is an uncommon name that, from what I can tell, appears to be Germanic in origin. But if you think about it, his name does sound an awful lot like the names given to some of the severed employees at Lumen when management appears to change the names of the severed workers as a way of hiding their identities. We see this with Helena Eagan becoming Heli R instead of Helena E, or Gemma becoming Miss Casey. Rebecca, for example, sounds like a play on Reba K or Rebecca. So could Ricken be the same? Is Ricken a play on Rick N? But yeah, Harmony Cobell, Miss Selvig. Interesting, isn't it? Now, fans have noted that there is a moment in the show where Mark greets Ricken by calling him Rick, and he's immediately corrected and asked to refer to him as Ricken. That's really odd. I mean, we know that Mark and Ricken have known each other for at least as long as Mark has been married to Gemma, so this conversation seems a little late, right? Unless, of course, he did go by Rick in the past and changed it for some reason. Is it Ricken because he's severed? Personally, finding out he's severed would be a relief because at least then we could explain his weird behavior. Now, there are some issues with this theory that need to be explained, one of which is how could any of this get past Devon? Devon's far too smart and observant to miss this. Ricken would have to have been this weird when she met him. Also, Ricken seems to be staunchly opposed to severance as a concept, to the point of being disappointed in Mark for going through with the procedure. We know this because of how he casually brings it up at the dinner table, knowing full well how sensitive the subject is with Mark. He acted like it was a slip of the tongue, but if you watch the scene again, sometimes it does look like he was trying to throw shade here. That could just be us seeing what we want to see, or it's Ricken, again with the bumbling. Speaking of Ricken's weird foodless dinner scene, the only two people that come across as normal in this entire sequence are Devin and Mark. Everyone else here exhibits a childlike wonderment and understanding of the world. I'm sure you remember Mark explaining that the term World War would not have been what people called it back then, and then the head explosions that followed. It's like they just realized a fact that should be obvious to all of the humans. Ricken's followers have that oddly innocent aura about them, the same vibe we get from the severed people working inside of Lumen. Remember Rebecca's weird comment at Ricken's book reading? She says something about a bird pecking her in the back of her nugget. Severance writers wouldn't drop a line like that unless it meant something. Some fans say that this line is a hint to the audience that she's been chipped. And the fact that she thinks a bird is to blame for her scar, well, that means she doesn't know she's been visited by old Sevi. This is part of a larger theory that claims that this town is filled with innies as a part of a test or experiment. I have a video on that somewhere. I'll try to point to it. But basically, this idea lends credence to the theory that Ricken's Goof Troop buddies are all part of the Severance project, and that's why they seem so naive and willing to stand for a guy who writes like this. Honestly though, I kind of like this theory. I think it's got some promise. Suffice it to say, if the foodless dinner guests are severed, then Smart Money says Ricken is also severed, because they all seem to behave in a similar manner. Alright, we gotta talk about goats. The goat connection is another angle you might hear about on the subject. Now, we mentioned the Frank Lloyd Wright house that the Hales reside in, but we didn't mention the goat memorabilia back at the ranch. The decor in this house is highly suspect, as there are a couple of statues in the house depicting goats, I think in at least 2 different rooms. By the way, I made a whole video on the subject of goats in Severance, and I learned more about goats than the average person should. So, what exactly are the writers trying to hint at here? Are goats trending? Is that what's hot in the streets right now? Fans think this is another reference to Ricken being severed. Goats are often used in the media to symbolize stubbornness, independence, and rebellion, which is very fitting, very fitting. Historically speaking, goats, along with sheep, have been the go-to animals for sacrifice as depicted in religious contexts. And finally, looking at it from the scientific angle, goats are renowned for their memory, their intelligence, and the fact that their physical brains are very similar to ours, making them the ideal test subjects for, say, an experimental brain implant. So which one are we working with here? Well, take your pick. For all we know, it could be all 3. I think the big takeaway here is that the goats certainly tie Ricken to Lumen in some way, and that should make us uneasy. It's either that or someone in set design really likes goats. I'll talk about Devin in the next Severance deep dive because she's got some explaining to do. I think I've rambled enough though, and I'm probably gonna have to cut half of this for the script. Anyway, what's your Ricken theory? I'm looking forward to hearing what y'all think about this in the comments. Also, let me know what you think about Devin because I want to cover her in the next one, and I can try to answer any questions or share your theories in the next upload. If you enjoyed this video, you already know what to do. Thanks for watching, especially if you made it this far, you're a star. Many thanks to the patrons, much love. Don't forget to treat yourself, tinfoilers, and until next time, off you go.